My name is Gail Anderson. I'm 33 years old, and on the happiest day of my life, my own mother tried to prove in front of 120 wedding guests that I was completely worthless. Right after I married the man I loved, she walked to the head table with a beautiful white gift box wrapped in silver ribbon. Everyone smiled. Cameras were pointed at me. She told me it was a family tradition. The moment I lifted the lid, I froze. The box was completely empty. Then my mother smiled and said loud enough for the entire room to hear, "That's exactly what your marriage is worth." Half the room laughed. My own relatives laughed. My sister laughed. I stood there holding an empty box, while the people who were supposed to love me watched me fall apart. But what nobody in that room knew was that 20 minutes later, my 84-year-old grandmother would quietly place another box into my hands. And what was hidden inside that second box wouldn't just destroy my mother's secret. It would change our entire family forever. Before I tell you what happened that night, you need to understand why my mother hated the man I married so much. My husband, Danny Marsh, isn't a millionaire. He's a power lineman. He climbs electric poles during snowstorms so families can have their lights back. His hands are rough, his boots are always dirty, and he never cared about expensive suits or fancy cars. The first time we met was during a blackout in our neighborhood. I brought him a hot coffee because he was still working after everyone else had gone home. Instead of asking what I did for a living or how much money I made, he asked me what made me happy. Nobody had ever asked me that before. My family measured everything in dollars. Love always came with conditions. If you were useful, you mattered. If you weren't, you disappeared. I spent my entire childhood trying to earn a place at my own mother's table. When my grandmother needed someone to drive her to the hospital, I went. When relatives forgot birthdays, I bought the gifts. When family members needed help moving, I showed up first and left last. Everyone called me the reliable one. Never beautiful, never talented, never enough, just reliable. Like an old car people only remembered when they needed something. Then Danny came into my life and looked at me like I was already enough exactly the way I was. That terrified my mother. A week after we got engaged, she invited the entire family to a fancy restaurant for dinner. She chose one so expensive that even the menus didn't show prices. When we arrived, she'd already arranged the seating. She placed Danny all the way at the end, beside the children's table, with my 9-year-old niece, Sophie, and 2 little cousins coloring on paper placemats. My mother smiled sweetly, as if it was completely normal. Danny didn't complain. He sat down beside the children and spent 20 minutes teaching Sophie how to draw a little wooden house that wouldn't fall over. Then, in the middle of dinner, my mother loudly asked him, "So, exactly how much does a man who climbs poles make every year?" The whole restaurant went quiet. Danny calmly answered her. She repeated the amount slowly so every relative could hear how small she thought it was. My aunt laughed. My sister laughed. I felt my face burn with embarrassment until someone quietly stood up. My grandmother, Ruth, 84 years old. She walked past everyone, ignored the empty chair beside my mother, and sat beside Danny at the children's table instead. Then she smiled at him and asked, "Tell me, what's the scariest storm you've ever worked in?" Suddenly, nobody else at the table mattered. For the next hour, she listened to every word Danny said, while my mother sat silently tapping numbers into the calculator app on her phone. She always did that whenever she was angry, as if people's value could be added and subtracted like receipts. Driving home that night, she looked at me and said something I'll never forget. "Marrying him is the worst investment you'll ever make." I thought she was talking about money. I didn't realize she was talking about something much bigger, something she'd already planned behind my back. 2 weeks before the wedding, I accidentally overheard her speaking to a real estate agent about my grandfather's lake house. She kept calling it old, dated, and said it was time to clear it out. That house wasn't just a building. My grandfather Walter had built every inch of it himself. Every childhood memory I treasured lived inside those walls. Fishing on the dock, summer evenings, Christmas mornings. But the house wasn't even hers. It belonged to my grandmother. Still, something in my mother's voice made my stomach tighten. 3 days later, she publicly announced to the entire extended family that she was canceling her financial support for my wedding because she refused to invest in a marriage with poor fundamentals. She copied 30 relatives into the email just to humiliate me. Danny simply looked at me and smiled. Then we'll pay for our own wedding. We canceled the expensive venue and booked a small church hall instead. String lights, folding chairs, homemade food, friends who actually loved us. For the first time in my life, the wedding belonged to us, not my mother. A few days before the ceremony, my sister accidentally revealed that Mom had prepared a special surprise gift for the reception. She giggled and said, "She's going to make a point in front of everyone." That same evening, my mother called me and softly whispered, "Don't worry, sweetheart. After the reception, everyone will finally see exactly what your marriage is worth." I barely slept that night. Something terrible was coming, but canceling the wedding wasn't an option anymore. Then, on the morning of the ceremony, my grandmother phoned me. Her voice sounded different, calm, determined. She said only one thing: "Whatever happens tonight, stay close to me. And Gail, don't open anything until I tell you." I promised her I wouldn't, never imagining that only a few hours later, I'd be standing in front of 120 people, holding the most humiliating gift anyone has ever received. I walked back to the head table with the empty white gift box still sitting beside my plate. And although everyone expected me to cry, I didn't give my mother the reaction she'd spent weeks planning. She looked confused. The silence made her uncomfortable. Then I felt my grandmother gently squeeze my arm. Without saying a word, she slipped a small brown paper package into my hands, beneath the tablecloth, and whispered, "Now, open this one, but don't look at me. Look straight at your mother." My hands trembled as I untied the old string. Inside was a small wooden box I instantly recognized. My grandfather Walter had built it decades earlier. Resting on soft blue fabric were three simple things: my grandmother's worn gold wedding ring, an old brass union pin that belonged to my grandfather, and a folded handwritten note. I slowly opened the note and read the words, written in Grandma Ruth's careful handwriting. "Everything this family has, he built with these hands." They called him nothing. He became the richest man I ever knew. Wear this ring whenever someone makes you question your worth. Wear this pin whenever someone tries to decide it for you. My heart stopped. I looked exactly where Grandma had told me to look. My mother's face turned completely white. The smile disappeared instantly. For the first time in my life, I saw fear in her eyes. Real fear. She half stood from her chair, as if she wanted to run across the room and snatch the box away before anyone else saw it. Then, she slowly sat back down. That's when everything suddenly made sense. My whole childhood, my mother had proudly claimed our family came from old money and high standing. She never once mentioned what my grandfather actually did for a living. She had erased that part of our history completely. But the brass pin told a different story. Walter Anderson wasn't born rich. He was a union pipe fitter, a working man, a plumber who spent decades crawling under houses, fixing broken pipes, and building his own company with nothing except his hands. Every dollar my mother had ever enjoyed, every expensive dinner, every luxury, every ounce of the reputation she worshipped, had been built by the exact kind of man she had just humiliated my husband for being. Suddenly, I understood why she'd hidden that truth my entire life. Before I could even process everything, my mother rushed over to me wearing her fake public smile. To everyone else, it looked like a loving mother checking on her daughter after an emotional moment. But the second we stepped into the hallway near the coat racks, her smile disappeared. "Put that box away," she hissed. "Not here. Not now." I calmly asked, "Why? What are you so afraid of?" She ignored the question completely. Instead, she started talking about my grandmother. "She's old. She's confused. She doesn't understand what she's doing." Then she quickly changed the subject to the lake house. She insisted it needed to be sold because Grandma couldn't take care of it anymore. That's when I finally realized this had never been about embarrassing Danny. And it wasn't even about humiliating me. The empty gift box was simply another way to break me emotionally so I wouldn't question what she was secretly trying to do. She needed my grandmother to sign over the lake house before anyone discovered the truth. But something had changed inside me. Standing in that hallway, listening to my mother lie, I suddenly wasn't afraid of her anymore. 33 years of trying to earn her approval quietly fell away. I walked back into the reception, took Danny's hand, smiled at my grandmother, and silently made a promise to myself. The very next morning, before our honeymoon, before anything else, I was going to drive straight to the lake house and ask my grandmother one simple question. "Grandma, what do you really want?" I had no idea her answer would uncover a family secret buried for over 60 years and force my mother into a choice she never imagined she'd have to make. The very next morning, Danny and I drove straight to my grandmother's lake house. She was already waiting on the porch with 2 cups of coffee, almost as if she knew we'd come. The first thing she said was, "I'm not confused, Gail, and I'm not ready to lose the last place your grandfather built with his own hands." Then she opened an old shoebox filled with faded photographs. There was my grandfather Walter, covered in grease, smiling beside plumbing trucks, standing proudly with the small company he built from nothing. Grandma quietly looked at me and said, "Everything your mother calls family prestige, every dollar, every opportunity, every nice house, came from this plumber." My heart sank. My own mother had spent decades pretending her father never existed because she was ashamed of where she came from. Then Grandma handed me a folder. Inside was a legal document already prepared by my mother, a transfer deed. All it needed was Grandma's signature, and the lake house would legally belong to Carol. The following Monday, a notary was already scheduled to come. My mother hadn't planned to ask. She'd planned to pressure her into signing. Grandma looked at me with tears in her eyes and whispered, "I don't want Carol to erase your grandfather's name forever." Because I worked in law, I knew exactly what needed to happen. That same Friday, we met with an independent real estate attorney and a doctor who confirmed Grandma was completely of sound mind. Together, we created an irrevocable trust, protecting the lake house forever. Grandma could live there for the rest of her life, and after that it would always remain in the Anderson family. It could never be sold. On the very first page of the trust was its new official name, the Walter Anderson House. 2 days later, before my mother's notary even arrived, everything was already legally protected. She had lost before she even realized the game had changed. But my mother wasn't finished. That evening, she called me with the sweetest voice I'd heard since childhood. She apologized, almost. Then she made me an offer. If I stayed quiet about Grandpa, if I allowed the lake house to be sold, she'd put me back in her will, pay for a luxury honeymoon, and welcome me back into the family. For one painful moment, I almost said yes. All my life I'd wanted nothing more than my mother's approval. But sitting at my kitchen table with Grandma's wedding ring on my finger and Grandpa's brass pin beside me, I finally understood something. The empty box had only hurt because part of me believed it. I had spent 33 years letting someone else decide my value. I wasn't going to do it anymore. 2 days later, at our family Sunday brunch, my mother proudly announced in front of everyone that I'd come to my senses and that everything between us had been fixed. She even raised her glass to celebrate. Then I quietly stood up. I placed Grandpa's wooden box on the table, pinned his old Union badge onto my blazer, and told everyone the truth. I told them Walter Anderson wasn't old money. He was a hard-working plumber who built every single thing our family owned. I told them the lake house was now permanently protected in his name and could never be sold. The entire dining room fell silent. My mother's face turned pale. Then she exploded. She shouted that I was permanently out of her will, that I'd never receive another penny from the family. She expected me to break. Instead, I simply smiled and answered with the only words that truly mattered. "You can keep the money, because my worth was never yours to decide." Nobody spoke. My mother lowered her eyes for the first time in my life. As Danny picked up our coats, my little niece Sophie ran over and pointed at the brass pin on my jacket. "Who did that belong to?" she asked. I smiled and replied, "To the greatest man this family ever had, the one who built everything with his own hands." 6 months have passed since that day. My mother still refuses to admit the truth. She still measures people by money. But every Saturday, Danny and I drive to the lake house, where Grandma is waiting with coffee and crossword puzzles. Grandpa's photograph hangs proudly on the wall again, exactly where it belongs. And every time I walk through that front door, I remember the lesson hidden inside 2 small boxes. One was completely empty. The other held everything that truly mattered. Because in the end, people can steal your inheritance, your money, even your family, but they can never decide your worth unless you hand them the pen yourself.